Yemen launches a crackdown on fighters belonging to Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. A number of them are reportedly killed in attacks launched by the Yemeni military. US drones are also said to be deployed, while Saudi Arabia watches with growing concern. How much of a threat is the Al-Qaeda group, and how successful is the campaign to eliminate it? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to Inside Story. I'm Mike Hanna. Yemen's defense ministry said it has carried out an unprecedented attack against what it calls fighters belonging to Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. The airstrikes took place in the south of Yemen, where Al-Qaeda is said to have camps in the mountains. The operation has reportedly targeted senior members of the group. Witnesses say the strikes were carried out by unmanned aerial drones. The US has acknowledged operating a drone program in Yemen, but refuses to comment on specifics. The chairman of the US House of Representatives Committee on Homeland Security, Michael McCall, has described Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula as probably the greatest external threat to the homeland itself. Speaking to ABC News America, he went on to say, "So I think the fact the administration now is going aggressively against these terrorists is a very positive sign." So what is Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula? The group formed in 2009 as a merger between the Yemeni and Saudi branches of Al-Qaeda, and is based in the south of Yemen, where a security vacuum has given the group the freedom to operate. It's sometimes described as one of the most aggressive offshoots of Al-Qaeda, responsible for attacks on Western targets as well as the Yemeni government. Last year, the threat of an AQAP plot led to the closure of more than 24 US embassies around the world. Well, for more on this, I'm joined by our three guests. From Sana'a, Hakim Al-Masmari, editor-in-chief of the Yemen Post. From Dubai, Riyad Kawaji, he's a military analyst and founder and CEO of the Institute for Near East and Gulf Military Analysis. And from London, Mohammed Kabati, a former ambassador and a member of Yemen's National Dialogue Conference. Welcome to you all. Let's begin in Sana'a with Hakim Al-Masmari. This described as an unprecedented military campaign, clearly a massive operation. What's the view from the capital?
People are shocked. The government is in shock and awe as well after the Al-Qaeda video that revealed tens, if not more than 100 Al-Qaeda militants celebrating together and in open daylight in mountainous areas without being surveillance whatsoever. So this is basically a cover-up for the government's failures in the fight against Al-Qaeda. They wanted to cover up the mistakes that they have been claiming that they have defeated Al-Qaeda, and that is why these attacks are taking place quickly and in a fast pace. And the government is even not clear with the death toll. It itself is not understanding how much people are dead. The defense ministry announced yesterday that a number were killed, but I did not clarify because it was a mountainous area that they did not have access to. So it's very, very critical right now. The government feels failure, and people are starting to lose hope that the government was serious in the past in its claims that it had defeated Al-Qaeda.
Well, Mohammed Kabati, in London, the video referred to there was footage that emerged of a large gathering, it was said, of Al-Qaeda groups in the past week, dressed by identified Al-Qaeda leaders, which apparently went unnoticed until well after the fact.
Well, I think we better focus on things which have happened in the middle, at the center of the city itself. These people were actually celebrating their success in or their ability to get some 20 plus prisoners from the central prison in Sana'a. They were celebrating their other operations, just only the last one which targeted the command of the 4th region in Aden. And before then, they managed to hit the center of Sana'a as well, at the headquarters of the armed forces. So actually, it shows that these people have got a lot of inside link and inside information. It just raises the question, how much of this has been all the time linked to the previous regime? I mean, excerpts from Carola Gold's book, which the New York Times just only brought some 3 days ago, it showed that bin Laden was actually at one time being sheltered or hidden with the knowledge of the top people in the Pakistan international security intelligence, and perhaps the knowledge of Musharraf, the former president himself. And here we know that this gathering which happened of Al-Qaeda celebrating, it was headed by somebody who is now said to be the number 2 in the whole structure of Al-Qaeda all over the world, Mr. Al-Wuhayshi, who has managed to escape, or not to escape actually, he was smuggled out from the from the high prison of the Central Security Organization, and which was known then later only at a later time. He was with the former president. He was there where the president, he met these people who escaped, and he gave them money and cars and so on. So it shows that there is something going on there in Yemen, which our friends, the Americans, have got really to take the advantage of the lessons they're getting now from Afghanistan.
Well, if I may just interrupt there, apologies, Mohammed, but I just want to get to Riyad Khawaji. We'll get into the responsibility or where all of this comes from in a moment, but Riyad Khawaji, your initial response to this current campaign that the Yemeni military says is underway?
Well, I would say it's just about time that they start employing air power more effectively from the Yemeni side. So far, we've seen the U.S. employ successfully their covert anti-terrorism operations using precision strikes from the drones. Now, what Yemen needs to try and acquire from the U.S. or other sources, that sort of capability. Right now, what Yemen has is a bit of aging MiGs and Sukhoi Soviet-era jets that require upgrading, updating with some standoff weapons. These attacks, we don't really have data on the outcome. We just know that they have targeted camps that had large numbers of Al-Qaeda. But the images of the Al-Qaeda in their recent gathering is a major intelligence blunder for both Yemen and the Americans. Apparently, Al-Qaeda seems to be in a very hospitable environment, a very friendly environment, enabling them to move freely without a real fear of being uncovered. So we have a major problem at our hand right now as international community in preventing these large ungoverned areas of Yemen from becoming a major stronghold for Qaeda.
Well, Hakim al-Masmari, I want to pick up on something that Mohammed Kabati brought up there, the allegation or the possibility that these Al-Qaeda groups, this Al-Qaeda group in particular, was operating with the knowledge of some within the Yemeni defense establishment, whether the hangover from past years or present, not quite clear. Is there any suspicion to this effect, you feel?
There is suspicion, but if that is true, it's the responsibility of the president to announce such things to the people and also to his allies in the West to ensure that going forward they have progress. This is not a secret. Many Yemenis have this in mind, that Al-Qaeda could not have had such a large gathering and celebrating without the knowledge or the access or the easing the way for them within the government. And I'm pretty sure that this is the responsibility of the counterterrorism unit and also the defense ministry and the president to ensure that going forward such things cannot happen. If not, then his name will also be will have a question mark as well. and will be involved in such suspicions.
Well, Mohammed Kabati, only recently the Yemeni president has reshuffled his intelligence services. He's put in new people, a new interior minister, and yet still no effect seen by that gathering. But is this operation now a consequence of that, a result of that, of the reshuffling within the Interior Ministry, for example?
We have already known, and it is now I think this is an issue which is going to be discussed here in London next week at the meeting of the Friends of Yemen. The present government and the president haven't managed actually to score a big success, very minimal success in the question of security sector reform. I mean, these operations which have been going on, whether hitting the towers of electricity, blowing up the oil pipelines and hitting in the center of the capital and in the center of Aden. I mean, it's obvious that there is a lot of these people who are working, they're moving freely. There must be some knowledge. So the security sector reform, I think, should be a first, a challenge for the government. And for the past 2 years, I think we haven't managed to make any success in that line. Only very topical, sort of few changes at the top. But I think the overall security and intelligence bodies has got to be reshuffled. As I've said, I think these people have moved. How could they have hit at the central prison in Sana'a and managed to get out some 20 plus of Al-Qaeda, prisoners? So this shows that the issue of appraisal of the whole security sector and to reshuffle it, to restructure it, is a top priority for the Yemeni government as well from our friends and whether regionally or globally. They have got to face this issue. The biggest, I think, failure till now over the past 2 years since Yemen post February 2011 has been at this area, the area of security sector reform.
Well, Riyad Kawaji, your view, is this an issue of not enough resources, not enough training, or is there perhaps something more sinister underlying it, that there's not the actual desire among some segments of the Yemeni military and intelligence to combat this threat?
It's a combination of issues, Mike. We have here the situation of a country that has a history of civil war, still a lot of issues to be resolved. You have here a country where tribes are the basis for the society. Tribalism is still very strong. Al-Qaeda is very good at playing on the tribal alliances to create safe zones, safe areas of operations for themselves. Also, they're very good at playing on the differences in countries where there are civil wars. Let's remember Afghanistan, how Al-Qaeda took advantage of this, embedded with themselves within the Taliban, while Taliban was engaged in a civil war with the Northern Alliance. Almost a similar situation you have there. Plus, you add to this the instability within the government itself, a lot of corruption, absence of any effective security sector reform, plus multiple socioeconomic problems. So we have here a very complex, compound situation that is making Yemen a good ground, a good stronghold for Al-Qaeda. So we need to have a stronger engagement from the international community. Plus, we need to see the Yemeni government able to bring together all these tribes, all these parties in an actual state-building efforts that will take in consideration the threats posed by Al-Qaeda to the society and how to deal with it.
Well, we'll go back to governance in a moment, but let's just take a look at the neighbor. As we mentioned earlier, Al-Qaeda is a major concern for Saudi Arabia, since it was partly founded by Saudi citizens. The group has vowed to bring down that country's ruling Al Saud family. And before members of Al-Qaeda fled to Yemen in 2009, the Saudi government led a major crackdown against the group. That was led by this man, Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Nayef, the kingdom's security chief at the time. The fight against Al-Qaeda would appear to be personal for bin Nayef, who's now interior minister. Al-Qaeda claimed responsibility for an assassination attempt against him in 2009. Mohammed Kibati, the presence of Saudi, obviously very important to Yemen. Are they taking part, do you believe, in this operation in the south of Yemen?
I believe that there is a lot of coordination, cooperation and collaboration happening between both the Yemeni and Saudi sides of as regards security. But as I have said, without security sector reform, still such efforts will always be dismal. It's all the time, without bringing actually people to account. We have known some of the former leaders of these organizations within the security apparatus who have never been actually confronted with their roles, and they are they have been walking around as if and sometimes might even take pride in what they have done to help such groups with their insurgency. So I think it's not only the Saudi. I think the Saudi will be coordinating their efforts, but I think our global partners are much more should be involved much more in this, as well as in the whole question of trying to reinstate the law and order in the country. And what we have come out from this, dialogue conference now, it had been, being, we can't see anything being achieved as regards that. Though we have discussed at the dialogue conference all these issues have been discussed, and the outcomes are not actually being implemented as regards many of these, issues we are addressing now.
Well, Hakim Al-Masmari, is extra help needed from the outside? Is extra help, for example, needed from Saudi Arabia, which of course is deeply concerned about events within Yemen?
It's not clear why Saudi is concerned. I think the pressure should be on Saudi Arabia from the Yemeni allies. It's not a secret that, as you said, these militants, many of them, they fled to Yemen after a crackdown from Saudi Arabia. This is not a success. When you make these militants go to another country, it's not a success against these militants. And it's not a success as well when you're fighting jihadists in Yemen, but supporting them in Syria, for example. So I think there should be more pressure from the Yemeni allies on Saudi Arabia to be more serious and be more clear on its policies and share intelligence information with the Yemeni government, rather than blaming the Yemeni government for its security problems and security worries.
Well, Riyad Khawaja, your view on that? Is Saudi Arabia playing a double role in a way?
No, Saudi Arabia has one defined role all the way along, which is to combat these Qaeda groups. Saudi Arabia was and still a primary target for Al-Qaeda. And Saudi Arabia has played a leading role on many fronts in combating Al-Qaeda. It's been one of the main victims of Qaeda attacks. The strong measures imposed by the Saudi authorities over the years have scored many successes, to the extent of the Saudis managing to preempt and prevent Qaeda attacks within the country. Now the Saudis, as other Gulf countries like the UAE, like Oman, who border Yemen or close to it, are very concerned about the Qaeda becoming stronger in Yemen, and all are contributing and seeking ways to help the Yemeni authorities and to prevent Al-Qaeda from growing stronger and hopefully to reach a point of eliminating its threat from Yemen.
Well, Mohammed Kibati, your view on that? Has Saudi actually exported its problem into Yemen, do you believe? Does it have a duty to try and deal with that problem now?
I think the Saudis, I mean, they have done their homework, they have done their job. They managed to get rid of those terrorists who are trying to, work and infiltrate all the country in all Saudi Arabia, and they have managed. And it's just because our border is very porous, and our people are not doing in Yemen their homework, and they're not actually facing these issues directly. The question of security should all the time be linked with the question of development. Without development, we have just I just came from Aden, from Yemen 3 weeks ago, and it was clear that these sheikhs were helping the Qaedas. They were taking hostages from Sana'a easily, top sheikhs, and getting them to the countryside where they would be selling them to Al-Qaeda, and Al-Qaeda will use them to get more funds for itself. And so these issues have been to be faced, comprehensively and globally from a global vision, without actually having success in building the state in Yemen and getting state of law and order and achieving all these, questions and successes regard all the questions we are facing in Yemen. Then there'll always be this possibility of Al-Qaeda having, a pool of people who will be working with them at any time and easily. And it has shown itself with its ability to strike all the way from east of the country to west of the country, north and south.
Well, Hakim Al-Masmari, your view on this? I mean, the argument appears to be increasingly that what is needed is good governance. What is needed is a massive improvement in security operations within Yemen. Let's start with that issue of good governance. Is governance a major problem and a major cause of the ongoing Al-Qaeda threat?
Oh, yes, it is. It's a major issue also because many jihadists are controlled by politicians and from all factions. And these jihadists, they are paid for missions. So there is a need for more pressure on the Yemeni government to ensure that there's transparency in its fight against militants, and to make everything clear on the other hand, because sometimes when the Yemeni government announces that you have 10 suspected terrorists killed, and in reality there are only 1 or 2 who were wanted, and you have 8 who were civilians. So you have to be clear and transparent if you want to really end this problem. You can't have double standards. You can't not be transparent and have civilians killed and then say that they're militants. If this happens, the result is what we saw in the video. Al-Qaeda is still powerful and strong and influential. So there needs to be transparency and more transparency within the government. And the Yemeni government must be clear with all its different factions, all the political factions, that anyone who plays double-sided will be accounted for that.
Well, Riyad Khawaji, we heard earlier a U.S. congressman saying that the greatest threat to the U.S. homeland is Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Is the U.S. waiting for other people to do their work for them? Should there be greater U.S. involvement in combating groups like Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula?
I don't think the U.S. is waiting for permission from anybody to do what they feel is best for the national interest. The U.S. is carrying out drone attacks in Yemen and Pakistan and Afghanistan, regardless of the positions and the views of the governments of these countries. We know in Yemen and Pakistan and Afghanistan, the governments in these countries have all called for the drone attacks from the U.S. side to stop, but the U.S. Has not actually adhered, and the U.S. is continuing because as the U.S. congressman has pointed out, the Qaeda is still and is becoming a major threat to the U.S. national security.
Well, at that particular point, our thanks to our guests, Hakim Al-Masmari, Riyad Khawaji, and Mohammed Kibati. And you can add your voice to the discussion at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or on Twitter. Our address is at AJ Inside Story. From everyone here on the team, I'm Mike Hanna. Goodbye for now.